is the elections of the world, not the American people only. Today we'll speak about the American presidential elections, in which will be very decisive in many cases around the world and in the United States. I'm very honored to interview George Sorial, one who is very close to the former President Donald Trump and hopefully will be the next president of the United States. Welcome, George, in Oxygen with Ram.
Thank you, Rami. It's my pleasure to very good to see you.
Let me introduce you to my audience, although we have before an interview, but George is attorney, consultant, and award-winning author of The Real Deal, and also he was the executive vice president and counsel to the Trump organizations for over than 12 years, working directly along Donald Trump and one of his trusted assistants. Actually, he now is the founder of Sorial Counseling and Green Met Counseling. Thank you very much. I know it's a very precious time for you. It's a few days and we'll have the final day of elections. So how do you see the elections till now?
Well, thanks, Rami. And again, it's very good to be with you. I feel very confident now. I think if you look at the polling, if you look at what the respective candidates are doing right now, if you just, anecdotally talking to friends and colleagues, it really seems like in the past 2 or 3 weeks, Trump has got a lot of momentum. I think he is looking very relaxed, very comfortable in his role. On the other hand, it seems like every day there's one misstep after the other with Kamala Harris. I think she had a little bit of a honeymoon when she first came out and announced her presidency, I guess about 2 months ago now. But I think reality has set in, and you can really see the differences. The more the spotlight shines on each candidate, the more we learn about them. And look, let's face it, the biggest evidence that I would use for supporting my position that I feel very confident that Trump will win is a simple question. And it's a question that gets asked during every election. How do you feel compared to 4 years ago? Are you doing better now, or were you doing better 4 years ago? And I think we can say unequivocally that not just in the United States, but globally, it's a very different world now. It's a world that's facing wars on multiple continents. It's a world where we've seen out of control inflation and pricing. The cost of everything seems to be skyrocketing. So when you ask that question, are we doing better now or are we doing better 4 years ago? I mean, I think we were doing much better 4 years ago. And the result of where we are now has the fingerprint of Kamala Harris. This is her administration. It's Biden and Kamala that put us in this very difficult situation that we find ourselves in right now.
Actually, you say you are confident. However, always when the leftists talk, they will attract more Americans in which they talk very good, but they rule very bad. I mean, there are a lot of catastrophes in the economy, a lot of catastrophes on the ethical side. I mean, there are outside America is a lot of wars. But what makes you confident? And elections is about talking good. We have seen that with Biden and Barack Obama. Now Kamala Harris, she didn't have any clear economic plan, but at first she was winning the polls. Now she is not.
Well, I think, Rami, when any new candidate comes out, especially I think, and I don't want to speak disrespectfully about President Biden. After all, he still is the president of the United States, irrespective of what we think of him. But really, the Biden administration has been an administration fraught with problems. And I think we can divide those problems into 3 separate baskets. You have the economy and inflation. That's one basket. And I think the end result of that is fairly obvious. You have an unprecedented amount of Americans now that are living paycheck to paycheck. They can't afford to pay their monthly bills. They can't afford groceries. They can't afford gas. They can't afford to buy new homes. They can't get mortgages. So that's one basket of problems for the Democrats. The second basket, why don't we call it immigration and the border? And I think, from the outset, I would have to acknowledge that I myself, I'm an immigrant. I immigrated here when I was 2 years old. Took my family 7 years. We became citizens in 1977. So I have nothing against immigration. And I think immigration certainly is one of the things that has made the United States unique, and put the United States in a very strong position globally. But it has to be done through a process. It has to be done legally. What we've really seen over the past 4 years is an unprecedented number. I mean, the tragedy, Rami, is even if you ask the government how many people have entered the country illegally, they don't know. They'll give you estimations. The number can be 10 million, it can be 20 million, it can be somewhere in between. But whatever the number may be, we have an unprecedented number of people literally walking into the United States, and we don't know who they are. Now, again, as an immigrant, and I think most Americans embrace my position, legal immigration is fine. We encourage it. We want immigrants, but there has to be a process. So that's the second basket. And really the third basket is, how is the world doing? And I point to the wars in Ukraine and the disaster that we have in the Middle East. And I would argue that both of those conflicts are the direct result of weak United States leadership. Had we had a strong president of the United States, I'm very optimistic that neither of these conflicts would have occurred and we wouldn't have to have this bloodshed. So I think when you really look at those three baskets, I mean, obviously there are other social issues that are important, but I think when you talk about what's really on the mind of Americans, it's economy, inflation, the border, and wars. I think hands down, Trump wins in all those categories. And again, you can point, Rami, to his record. This is not speculation. Look at what he did during the 4 years that he was president. And those were very difficult 4 years. I mean, I might add that in the last year of his presidency, we went through the unprecedented, time of an international pandemic where really, I mean, if you can remember those days, Rami, nobody knew what was going to happen. I mean, thousands of people were dying every day. Nobody knew how the disease was spread. So had we had a weak leader, the end result for the United States could have been much more tragic than where we were. So even with this challenge, Trump led the country to a very good place. But I think, again, it's those three issues that are really going to rule the day for this election.
That's great. And actually, we have seen those 4 years how much peace in the world, how much the American people were economically flourished. And aside to the 2 years of the pandemic, it was really great on all sides, the most peaceful time for the whole world. But I know that you are dealing very closely with President Trump. And still now we have a connection with him and with his organizations, Eric Trump as well. So what are the main characteristics of Trump? Why you are backing him? Is it because he is your boss one day, or there is a strong character? Describe me Trump on close, Scott.
Sure. I mean, I would say from the outset that I really enjoyed working with him. He was very
a tough boss.
Yeah, he was tough, but anyone in that position would be tough. There's nothing wrong with tough. I think, tough gets things done, Rami. Sometimes you have to be tough. But I found that he was fair. He was supportive. He did not micromanage me. contrary to what you might hear in the media, he listened to my opinion. Obviously, ultimately, he would make his own decisions, but I always felt that I could speak to him and freely communicate my thoughts and my positions without any punishment. He treated me very well. My wife also worked with him for several years. We're a complete Trump family. But I found him to be, he's very pragmatic. He's able to very quickly figure out what an issue is and isolate it and come up with a solution. He thinks more like a person, if you understand the saying, down on the ground. He has just a very pragmatic approach to resolving problems. He is not bureaucratic. He's very decisive. And you really need that type of thinking. I think the second component I would add is that he does care very deeply for the United States. I mean, really, this was not something that he needed, Rami. If you look at the history of Donald Trump, he did very well in many different disciplines, which is very unusual. He was what we know him to be, a real estate developer. He had some time where he was involved with casinos. He wrote books. He had a successful TV show. Oh, and then, by the way, when he was in his 70s, he became the United States president of the United States. So really, there's very few people that achieved such a high level of accomplishment in a wide spectrum of fields. And again, since we are talking really politics and we're talking about the election, I would argue, despite some of the noise that you may hear from the mainstream media, in time, let's say 100 years from now, when we're reflecting back on the Trump presidency, I really believe that his presidency will be looked at very favorably and very kindly. Again, I think his achievements are, especially in light of the fact that we had, when was the last time we had a global pandemic? 100 years ago? We had a catastrophic event occur under his watch, and he held the country together. He held the world together. He was a good ally. He was a good friend. He was a good leader, and he brought us through it. And I think that's something that he often is not given enough credit for.
And actually, I remember the last interview with you that you told me what you see, what you get from
That's right.
Trump.
That's right. He's a straight shooter, if that makes sense. And, look, I think if we're being, honest, does he say and do things that maybe I wouldn't say or you wouldn't say? Yes, everyone has his own unique style. And sometimes he gets himself in trouble for how he communicates. But, he's a unique person. He calls it as he sees it. I would measure him not in his words, but in his achievements. And his achievements and his accomplishments are many.
I tell you, I totally agree with you. But if we give an example of Barack Obama, the best who talks on the mic. I really admire his way of speaking, his expressions, using the right words. He is the best to do that, but he's the worst to rule.
Yes.
But is it politics? Is it politics? Is a kind of how to communicate with people?
Well, I think that's really, I can tell you a story. I don't know if I've told you it before, but it's a good one. And I think it really illustrates one of the reasons why people like him. And I think one of the reasons why he's going to be reelected. But I was walking with him one day on a construction site, and we were discussing a whole spectrum of issues. And he, took a moment and said to me, George, people always ask me how I did so well, how I got to where I am. And he told me it's so easy. He said, I look around and I want, and I give it to them. I see what people want and I give it to them. And if you think about it, let's go back to 2016. I think people were fed up. People were fed up with Obama. People were fed up with politics. And it was very refreshing to get a guy that spoke like a regular person. I mean, it's a strange thing now. Trump has become a politician, but he really wasn't a politician. He talked like a business person, like a guy on the street. He talked like a New Yorker. And I think people found that very refreshing. So that simple advice that he gave me that day that, look, I look around and I see what people want and I give it to them. That's really what happened in 2016. People were looking for something different and Trump gave it to them. How does he know about people? He is a voracious reader. He reads everything, newspapers, magazines, whatever he can get his hands on. Obviously, it's no secret he pays attention to television, but bottom line is he is someone that goes through life observing people and seeing what they want. And I think you're seeing it again now in 2024. In some ways, the situation that we're in now is really very similar to where we were in 2016. And once again, I think Trump has become the voice of the average person. You can see his rallies. I mean, have you ever seen anything like this, Rami, in politics? I mean, I've been to a lot of these rallies. They don't have the feel of a political rally. It really has more the feeling of, a musical event, a rock event, a sports event. You see people there of all ages, younger kids, teenagers, college students, middle-aged, older people, men, women, from all different walks of life, different races, different ethnic backgrounds, different ages, men, women. So his appeal is really very wide. And I think it's very simple because people can relate to him. The media will say, oh, he's a billionaire. He's not like them. He doesn't care about the common man. And I'm somebody that worked with him very closely for many years. I don't agree with that. I mean, this is a person that really cared about the people that worked for him from every level, down to a guy opening the door, all the way up to an executive vice president. I mean, everybody was treated well. And he would frequently ask to get opinions from everybody. I mean, another example I use is, if we're going to put a piece of rug, let's say in a ballroom, he would have 4 or 5 samples. I mean, it's a true story, sitting on his desk. And every single person that walked in, which one do you like? What looks better? And this would be from bankers to lawyers to doctors to actors to politicians to cleaning staff, secretaries. He asked everybody, what do you think of it? And then ultimately, he made his own decision, but you can see the thinking, Rami. And I think that's one of the reasons why people like him. He goes out, he interacts, he goes all over the country. I mean, he was in a McDonald's last weekend, just talking to people. That was not, obviously there's always an element of theater with politics, but at the same time, you can see that he's relating to the people there. They're liking him. He's feeding off of them. They're feeding off of him. So I think that's what makes his appeal so unique.
Actually, that's what we need in this world. We need less deceiving of the politics, less deceiving of the media. And mainstream media, it is very clear that it is biased. And I can tell you, I'm biased to to the people who work for the people like Donald Trump, unbiased, to the people who are true. Even I'm not agree with all what they said, but I will choose people who are true, do not deceive, because what I experienced, especially from the leftists, that they are deceiving the people, they are killing the people with smooth slogans, and that is not in Donald Trump. Like what happens on Kamala on the abortion, she promote the freedom of the woman. However, that the body of the woman, it is her own. However, I do see that the body of the child he owns, nobody can decide for that. In addition, for some ethics, religious ethics, and some stuff, and even such that Donald Trump gives the freedom for each state to decide about the abortion. My question is, what do you think if Kamala Harris is the next president, or Trump, about the Middle East? So my question, what do you? There is how can we say, a lot of wars and fights. It's a fiery Middle East. So what are your expectations if Kamala or Trump?
Well, I can tell you something. We're going to see continued chaos and lack of leadership and no presence. I mean, what you see now, remember, she has been the vice president now for, coming up on 4 years. This is her creation. This is her mess. This is her administration. So unfortunately, with respect to the Middle East, I spent some time there, Rami, and as you know, obviously we have similar backgrounds. I have a lot of family that still live in Cairo, and I try to go to Egypt at least once a year, and I do some work.
I forgot to mention that George Sorial is an Egyptian Coptic guys, American from Egyptian Coptic roots, and we're very proud of you. Sorry for interruptions, but I didn't mention at the beginning of the episode. Please go on.
No, that's okay. That's okay, Rami. So I don't live there, so I can't say that, I can't speak as an Egyptian, citizen living in Egypt. But, I speak to Egypt. I speak to my cousins, every week. They come here, I go there. And, the Middle East right now is struggling. I mean, the tragedy of all of this is, before this incident last year on October 7th, this disgusting massacre, which there's no justification or excuse. But really, before that, the Middle East was actually doing fairly well. And I think things had really calmed down there. There may be residual difficult feelings. I mean, in any area where there's conflict, there's always going to be some lingering tension, but people were working together. People were starting to respect each other. People were doing business with each other. Everybody was recognizing that the other had a right to exist. Christians, Jews, Muslims. I mean, in reality, Rami, when you really look at it, people are not that different. Okay, we have some different beliefs. We have some different traditions, but what do I want? I want to live my life in peace. I want to be able to live a free life. I want to have a good future. I want to be able to educate my kids, raise them in a decent society. That's no different from what a Jewish person wants, or no different from what a Muslim person wants. I mean, we're really not all that different. We're told that we are, but we're really not. So it's a really tragic situation, because I think because of the weak U.S. leadership, Hamas, again, I don't want to get too political, but in my opinion, in my humble opinion, Hamas did nothing for the Palestinians. Hamas they are an evil, ungodly group of killers. And we have to be very specific with how we describe them. They are evil. There is nothing noble or good about them. They are not fighting for anyone's freedom. Unfortunately, they committed this atrocity on October 7th, and they plunged the whole region into chaos again. But I great optimism, great optimism, Rami, that Trump will come back in and he will impose, order, and it will be a fair order for everyone. Ironically, I have Palestinian friends. I have good friends that are Orthodox Jews. I have Muslim friends, and I sometimes tell them, especially with Jews and Muslims, you guys have similar restrictions in how you dress, in how you eat. You believe in the same God. I mean, their lives are really not that different. So I have optimism that we have, with some strong U.S. leadership, we can give everyone in the region a future. And I even, think now, speaking, as a Copt, as a Christian, we know that in certain parts of the Middle East, especially post-ISIS, the Christian community suffered. Trump, a champion for Christians in the Middle East, and I think he will continue, to carry that torch.
My next question is, there are some accusations about Trump that he is somehow differentiate between people. Sometimes they call him a racist, and the media pick up some words, some actions. So you are a close person, and please tell me the truth, not for promoting Trump.
I mean,
is
Rami,
that
look at me. I mean, I'm Egyptian origin.
a Christian?
I'm an immigrant. I mean, I never. The Trump organization was a very large place with operations all over the world, and people were not measured by their religion, by their gender, or by their skin color. They were measured in their ability to perform and the results that they brought, back to the organization. Everybody was treated equally. Everybody was treated respectfully. So I don't agree at all with any of these assertions that, he is somehow a misogynist or a racist. The Trump organization was a very diverse place, and everybody was treated equally. So I completely reject, people that make those assertions. I saw someone on TV yesterday saying he was a fascist and, comparing him to Hitler. And I
have said that as well.
It's very offensive, Rami. But you know what? When people go to that level, to me, it's desperation. They're losing. So I again, despite the words being hurtful, to me, they were a sign that these are people that are defeated and they're taking their last shots.
That's great. So after the elections, do you think that will be there is a civic war that will happen because of this polarization that happens on the American? Either Trump wins, please God, or Kamala Harris win, God forbid.
I don't think, again, I'll go back to what I was saying before. The media tells us every day that we're very divided. But I don't, this whole notion that it's okay to have political disagreements, even amongst friends, just because someone is a Democrat, that doesn't mean I can't be friendly with them. I mean, half my friends are Democrats. It's okay for people to have disagreements. I mean, that's what makes life interesting. I don't think that the American public is that divided. What I really think is that we have fringe elements, fringe on the left and fringe on the right. Both sides are equally guilty, but you have small groups of fringe elements that are making a lot of noise. But these are a small number of people. I mean, I think if I had to quantify it, maybe you're talking about 5% of the people are making a lot of noise, and that's what get covered by the media because it's interesting and it makes people watch. But I think at the end of the day, Americans are very similar, and even though people do have political differences, I think they can get along, and I don't see the prospect of violence or conflict. I think these are scare tactics that the media uses mainly against Trump. I think the democracy will do just fine. Obviously, I think you know which direction I want, the election to go. But I think either way will survive. I think it would be nice if there was a very decisive decision. If someone won by a landslide, let's say, I think that would be a good indication that the country is a lot more unified. But either way, no, I'm not concerned about conflict or civil war. I think that's just nonsense that's made up by the media.
Yeah, I'm a media guy. I know how wicked some media plan to distribute fear to the public so that they direct them.
Right.
Either they deceive them by wrong images or half truths or by fear. This is the tools of a bad media. They do not give the absolute or they give the facts as it is, because there is an agenda, especially with those mainstream media, for that we suffer from them here a lot in Canada. We have just some reports about a famous TV stations, actually CBC, that they put half of the truth, half of Pierre Poilievre conversation, and then to make a lie as a fact. Actually, we need someone who is true, who can maintain peace, and he didn't need to prove because he did it before. We need someone who broke the evil of the leftists, in which they killing people softly by their slogans. This American song, "Killing Me Softly."
Yes.
So, but they use the slogans to deceive. And actually, when you see here Kamala Harris, when she spoke, she has an empty promises. I will just catching some mistakes from Trump, and at the end, killing the abortion, economic, very, very bad economic status for the whole world, and actually wars and evil thoughts and ethical damaging for the family. We need someone who knows to play the art of the deal. We need someone who can support people without a political agenda. Trump does not need anything from the presidency, and he proved it more and more. And it's time for the American people to wake up from the poison of the slogans of the leftists. Yes, please. I don't want to finish these episodes, but I know that your time is precious.
You know what I would say, Rami, just to follow up with you, you made a very good point. Trump spoke directly to the people. Okay, he received a lot of criticisms for his use of Twitter, for example. But this was actually a very powerful tool because it allowed him to go around the media and speak directly with the people. And I think that's really why the media feels very threatened. I mean, Trump is a disruptor. He does things differently. And to some extent, he has made the media obsolete. He doesn't need them. They need him. He doesn't need them. He can talk directly to the people. And this is something, Rami, is very unique. He's really the first leader to behave that way. So whenever there's change, you know this, Rami, whenever there's change, it disrupts things. It makes people nervous, and the reaction is negative. And that's what we've seen from the media.
Yeah, that's true. And we hope to, as Oxygen, to provide a true media without a political agenda or business agenda. We just need people who serve people, not people who plan to kill people by smooth slogans. George, we would love to follow up with you at the last days of the elections. We hope to be with us on the night of the elections to give us your, how can I say, your opinion about what's happening, especially the swinging states. And I also would like to mention that the recent polls witness that Donald Trump is heading Kamala Harris, by 1 or 2 points. So that's interesting, and we would love to see him again on the presidency of the world. So thank you very much. If you would like to finish this episode by a wrapping.
Thank you very much. My honor, pleasure It's always very refreshing for me to be on your show, and I look forward to talking to you more going forward.
George, we are very proud of you, and we are hoping to have the best board when Trump is on charge. Thank you very much, and see you soon with the elections results.